Good morning.
Constabulary has announced that it's going to be doing a trial of live facial recognition technology in the county. Welcome that, and there's a lot of scrutiny process in place around that. A number of things I wanted to cover this morning around that. Perhaps we could just start by, if you could talk through why the Constabulary has wanted to undertake this trial and what you're hoping the outcomes of it will be.
Yeah, of course, Commissioner, thank you. Live facial recognition is a way of catching more criminals. And at its simplest level, I want to use every means lawfully and ethically and reasonably at my disposal to do just that. It's a way of using camera technology to identify individual people incredibly accurately, but with people involved as well to provide the right safeguards to catch people who are wanted for crimes in Hertfordshire. So be that robbery, be that domestic abuse, be that violent offending, car theft, burglary. The live facial recognition trial we're going to bring to Hertfordshire, I hope, will help me catch more of those criminals.
Thank you. And could you describe how the deployment works? And so if members of the public happen, we're not going to go into the location today because it's published in due course, but if members of the public happens to be in that location at that right time, what would members of the public see happening?
It's a really simple concept. Like members of the public will understand that in town centres there are CCTV cameras. So we will deploy a camera with live facial recognition technology sitting behind it. And what that means is that camera has access to a predetermined list that the police choose of known criminals who are likely to be in that area or in our county. The camera searches the faces of people walking past it, and the technology matches the individual. So if I'm Billy the burglar and I walk past that camera and you're monitoring that camera, it will say that person there looks like Billy the burglar. You then look at it and go, yeah, I think that is a good match. I agree with the technology. And you as an expert then would send a local officer in that high street or zone and say, go and stop that person and have a conversation with them, because the technology suggests that's the burglar. And if the officer goes and confirms it is, the arrest gets made. And if it's not, the system is really, really accurate. So in the small chance it's not, we can correct that and the person can go on their way. So that's what it is.
And that interaction that the officer might have with that member of the public wouldn't be particularly different to if an officer had just been on patrol and had just seen somebody that they perhaps recognise themselves.
Exactly that. It's neighbourhood policing supported by technology to try and put our neighbourhood officers in front of the right people having the right conversations. A key part of this is making sure it's done in a professional and human way. This is not brand new technology. It's been used successfully in other forces in the country, in London, in Essex and elsewhere, and it's having some really good results.
Thank you. And so we're not going to go into the deployment location and details because that gets published by the Constabulary in advance anyway. How a deployment location is selected, what factors are considered by the Constabulary in reaching that decision of whereabouts in the county the technology might be used?
It's a really important question and probably a really obvious answer, to be frank. We will pick the places where people are likely to be and or where our crime is likely to be high. So high streets, high footfall areas are the types of places we would deploy the technology. It's a mobile capability that we can develop, so you can put the cameras in a van, for example, and put it in the right place. So we can be really, really thoughtful about how we do it.
Thank you. You talked about the technology being fairly tried and tested and used by other police forces previously, new to Hertfordshire but not new nationally. How accurate is the technology and what mechanisms are in place to ensure or minimise the risk of people being wrongly matched or there to be discrimination in that system?
Yeah, there's been an awful lot of independent academic study into the accuracy of this capability we're talking about, live facial recognition, and there's lots of statistics that I could kind of talk about here, but the headlines are that it's really, really good at positively identifying people, and there is really very low circumstances where it identifies someone incorrectly. The safeguards that are in place around that is that's the technology, but then there's people that make further decisions on the back of that. So the person in the van says, I think that is a good match by the tech, then sending an officer to do it. So there is always a human interaction here. So in many ways, this technology, as you've said, Commissioner, is no different to an officer seeing someone they think they recognise off a briefing sheet and going having a conversation. That will be exactly the same. A officer will have a conversation with a person and check the facts that the technology is giving them, and only if they agree with it will then use their powers to make an arrest. So there's a huge amount of safeguarding behind it. What's important though here is I recognise, and the evidence base nationally indicates, that some members of our community may feel worried about this from kind of an infringement on civil liberties. Some particular parts of our community may feel that they could be disproportionately targeted by this. What I can say to you is that the evidence base nationally says there's no statistically significant difference between the accuracy of the technology for any kind of demographic factor. There are differences, but no statistical significant difference. So we will be working really hard with community groups in Hertfordshire, with our IAGs, with the Race Inclusion Board and others to say this is it, this is how it works, come and look at it, see how we're trialling it, to build that trust and confidence in the capability that we're using and really, really carefully assess the results that we get from it.
Thank you. And part of that reassurance and understanding to people in the community is an understanding of how people get into the watch list, essentially, and I'm sure the answer is probably quite obvious in terms of people being wanted, but what process, again, without going into the details of exactly who might be on the list of people being sought, but how does the constabulary decide who is on the watch list for that deployment being looked for?
So we would, as a constabulary, look at who are the high-risk, high-harm offenders that we think we need to arrest. The obvious categories: burglary, car crime, violence, sexual offending, drug dealing, and we would compile a list of people we currently want to question about that offending, and those individuals are going to be the people on the watch list. You can tailor that if you've got, let's say, I don't know, hypothetically we're going to deploy in Watford, just as an example. You could tailor your list to local offenders as well, but there has to be a really careful process and an evidence base behind why you put people on that list. It's all documented and all recorded.
Thank you. And one of the questions you see in the national debate about this technology is around privacy implications. So what happens when an individual isn't a match? So if someone has walked past the van, they're not a match. What happens to the image of somebody who's done that?
That image is immediately deleted. It's processed. The system says that person isn't on our record list, and the machine immediately forgets it. If the individual is a match, that is then retained for 24 hours to ensure that the action that was taken on the back of that, if you need to go back, you've got the audit trail around that. So if it's not you, your image is immediately deleted.
Thank you. So there's a clear evidence base before someone would go on to the watch list in terms of being wanted or an offence, and if you're not, it's immediately deleted. I think that's reassuring.
That's exactly that. And all this information that we have and largely immediately delete or retain because it was a positive match is not shared with anybody else. This is police data for policing purposes of fighting crime.
Thank you. And the question that gets raised in the media discussion about this is, can the public opt out of being scanned by a live facial recognition system?
So the public, or more precisely a criminal, could not opt out of us deciding to put them on a list. But the way this deployment would work, it's pre-advertised where we're going to be. And there's lots of signage up on the day, so if you were walking down a street, you could decide, well, I don't want to walk down that street because I can see there's a live facial recognition exercise on there. So to that extent, you can walk the other way. I guess the honest piece is part of the policing tactics. If as you walk away, you look rather shifty and you've run away from the signs, it's quite likely one of my officers will follow you and tap you on the shoulder and say, why did you turn round at that point? So it's pre-advertised, it's pre-published. There's no ability for criminals to opt out, but you have a choice about whether you walk down that street when you see those signs.
Thank you. How will the public know when and where the deployment is taking place?
It will be advertised on our websites, it will be advertised on our social media channels, and as I just alluded to, in the location on the day, there'll be really clear signage.
Thank you. And appreciate in advance of the kind of first trial of this technology that there's a lot of questions about it, and we're talking about the kind of theory and the systems and the processes. And of course, one of the things that's really key in terms of evaluating is what actually happens when the technology is used. How will those outcomes be evaluated and communicated after the first deployment?
But we will really carefully evaluate it because I'm really, really interested in it. I believe this will help us catch criminals in Hertfordshire, which I think is what I certainly want to see, and I think that the public of Hertfordshire want me to be delivering. But we'll look at it and we'll publish it within 5 working days. So there'll be full visibility to you and the public of what it did.
Thank you, and look forward to seeing that, and no doubt we'll probably discuss the outcomes of that at a future one of these meetings. Thank you for that, and to provide some assurance to members of the public watching, there is a lot of scrutiny going on around this, including some community scrutiny events when the deployment location has been announced, and as Police and Crime Commissioner, I keep a keen interest in how the technology is being used.